morning and welcome back to WDIA, the Bev Johnson Show. I'm Bev. Good morning. Welcome in on this Wednesday, Hump Day, October 19th, 2022. Yeah, that is some good stuff there. Reza Khan, Funkonomics. Funkonomics, what? Before that, Richard Elliott and Marvin Gaye cover Inner City Blues, and Larry Carlton before that, a Michael McDonald cover, Minute by Minute. Good to have you here on this beautiful fall day in Memphis, Tennessee. Yeah, my guest got here. He's here. Love to have him. Always, always welcome back. No stranger to the Bev Johnson Show. Please welcome Mr. Ronald Heard. A second. I think I'm right.
Yeah, you're right. Definitely right. It's an honor to be on Queen and Sister.
We all be Group Incorporated CEA. How you doing, brother?
I'm good. I'm blessed and highly favored, but it's like it skipped fall and went to winter time though. It's like it's wintry.
You know what? You know what? But it's not officially winter yet,
No,
Ron. And I was just talking to my market manager, and I was saying, you know, in Upper Michigan, the Upper Peninsula, they have snow. I mean, the snow. And somewhere other places that they have snow, and already the snow is coming.
Wow.
And I'm a snow person. Yay!
It's good for you. You're not an ice person, right? You're just a snow person.
No, I'm later for the ice. No. See, I know I grew up in the snow. Well, I grew up in Michigan, so we have snow. And we didn't have to deal with all the ice because they have all the machinery that can do that. But here, no, I won't see no ice. I can take the snow, but no ice in Memphis, Tennessee.
I know that's right.
Brother, how you doing since the last time I saw you?
I'm still going. I'm still ticking. I'm above ground, and making things happening. Sometimes things happen to me, but in life it's not but what happens to you, is how you respond to what happens to you.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, say that again. That's powerful.
It's not what happens to you in life, it's how you respond to what happens to you.
You're absolutely, that determines.
Yes, ma'am.
I love that, Ron. But before we get started, tell us about your organization, We All Be Group Incorporated. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Well, yes, ma'am. The We All Be Group Incorporated is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And what we do is we put on annual cultural enrichment events and empowerment events throughout the year that's dedicated to the Memphis community. Try to inform people about the powerful Memphis narrative as it relates to the American cultural identity, and also to like this around here locally. There's so much richness here in this city.
Yes, it is.
And you said that song Funkonomics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's like the economy is kind of funky right now. I ain't gonna lie to you. The inflation is crazy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like it's funny because I was at Crosstown at the Memphis Listening Lab yesterday. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to some people. I said, like 20-something years ago, you look at the Sears Crosstown, it was an eyesore.
It was.
Now it's an oasis. Yeah.
Now think about that.
Yeah.
And you are so right. And I'm going to let you continue, but I was just thinking about that. When you think about what you can do, that Sears building stayed empty. It was an eyesore. It was horrible.
Yeah.
Look, Crosstown, look what they did.
Exactly.
Okay,
that's what we're doing. We put a little shine on Memphis' name, put some respect on Memphis' name by shining it up and talking about the other part of our history, the triumphant parts. Try to balance out with the tragedy, because it's funny with Memphis. It's like people say that Memphis is the land of the dead, but everywhere I go around the country, people when they find I'm from Memphis, they expect greatness.
Yes,
they know that y'all some game changers, y'all some innovators, trendsetters, and all this stuff, but we like to harp on the negative stuff.
Yes, we do.
Like, for example, we had honor of Vera Little last year, or in 2020, I'm sorry. We did the ceremony last year because of the COVID situation, but Vera Little is a great opera star, legend from Manassas, from North Memphis. And when you think of April 4th, you normally think of like Dr. King getting assassinated here in Memphis, but on April 4th, 1959, Vera Little became the first Black American singer to perform for the Pope at the Vatican.
What?
Yeah, it's a sister from North Memphis.
From what? North Memphis?
Right. Went to the Vatican to perform for the Pope on April 4th, 1959. There's images on Google that can show you getting, handshaking with the Pope and all that stuff. So, that's another thing to look at. Because, April 4th, 68, that was sad. But April 4th, 1959, that's triumphant for Memphis history and for American history. And then that she is the sister, one of the greatest jazz trumpeters who ever walked this planet, Booker Little, who died 3, but she lived until old age, and she died back in 2012. But like that's the part of Memphis people don't talk about, the people that really innovate. This is a place where people come to be indoctrinated with greatness as an incubation place, and then you go out into the world and do great things, and you amplify your talents, and also you be a blessing to other people. So what we try to do with the We All Be Group Incorporated, we try to instill that sense of self-confidence in our people here by highlighting, the tragedies of history, but also balancing out with the triumphs. For example, every year we do the Fort Pillow wreath laying ceremony to honor the victims of the Fort Pillow massacre that happened during the Civil War, April 12th, 1864. We had a statue up here for a long time of Nathan Bedford Storrs, the equestrian statue. He was the guy who led the Confederates into slaughtering U.S. colored troops, white Union soldiers, as well as black women and children at Fort Pillow in Henning, Tennessee. And so, they just took down his statue almost 5 years ago, come this December. My thing is, don't only take out the statue, but put counter the narrative with something powerful.
Yes.
Like remembering the victims and putting names and sometimes even faces to these people and finding out about their stories. Don't forget about them. No, don't let them be a footnote or marginalized by history. So that's what we try to balance out the narrative about our works in the community. Like we even held we had an art show at on the main gallery downtown Memphis. Some of the best artists in the Memphis region or area came out to interpret their take on the Fort Pillow massacre, and also to offer an alternative historical spin on what if we really got our 40 acres and a mule like we should have got it? What if we got our reparation? Well, the reconstruction continued longer than 10 years or a decade. How would Black people look at society today? So we do a little bit of Afrofuturism in some of the stuff we do. We even brought down, helped bring down the Sun Ra Orchestra from Philadelphia to Memphis back in 2018 with the help of the Mike Curb Institute at Rhodes. And from my understanding, it's the first time they ever played in Memphis was in 2018. So I can't believe you name Sun Ra Orchestra never played in Memphis until 2018. So we do stuff like that. We try to bring positivity and also innovate and amplify, make people aware of this greatness that's really every day, but it's kind of invisible.
Yes,
to the untrained eye.
We have a lot of history in this region.
Yes, ma'am.
And a lot of us don't know a lot about it.
No, we don't. It's funny. It's not funny. I always say when it's funny, I'm not saying it's a jokingly way, but
exactly.
It's I went to Mount Nebo this past Sunday.
Okay.
And Mount Nebo is where the great Lucy Campbell had her funeral back in January of '63. And I was under the assumption that she was a member of Mount Nebo. But a deacon actually corrected me, who was 93 years young, who was actually a student of Lucy Campbell at Booker T. Washington High School. Okay. Which is interesting. He said, no, man, she went to Central Baptist. I said, okay. I read online somewhere, no, she was my school teacher. We had a funeral here. I was at the funeral. He was he was energetic for 93 years young, very agile, sharp mind.
Oh, good.
So he corrected me and stuff like that. I also think she went to Central Baptist and also Metropolitan over there by Lamar Owen at one point.
Right.
So, but when I talked to some of the other elders in the congregation after church, a lot of them wasn't aware of Lucy Campbell, which is interesting to me because some of them was alive and they act like they wasn't alive. I mean, whatever, but they wasn't even aware. Yeah. And then I brought up the issue of Jimmy Lunsford. A lot of them never heard of Jimmy Lunsford.
Right.
But I'm sure their parents, heard of Jimmy Lunsford, were fans. Yeah. But the problem with us as a people is that we don't tell our stories.
No, we don't.
Yeah, we die with those stories.
Yes, we do.
You know what I'm saying? A lot of times we don't respect the elders in our family to be patient enough to shut up and let them tell their version of the story. Right. Because I learned about Emmett Till and all that stuff just listening to my elders growing up from Mississippi. I never learned about Medgar Evers in grammar school. I learned about Medgar Evers because my grandma had a World Book Black History Encyclopedia 1970s edition. One edition, but I used to sit on the floor in her living room because she had the plastic on the couch. So I wasn't special enough to sit on the plastic.
I feel you, brother. I know.
My cousins from Michigan could sit on the plastic couch.
But you could.
I couldn't sit on the plastic couch. But I would just sit down there for hours looking through that book. And I learned about Medgar Evers and Paul Robeson. I even learned about the Fort Pillow Massacre reading that book. So I knew about this stuff when I was in the 5th grade.
Wow.
But I didn't expect the school to teach me that. And I told kids yesterday at Manassas, the job of a school is not to teach you who you are. You learn it from your family, from your tribe, from your village. But what if the village doesn't exist? What if the family lacks knowledge of self? Then this was where we all be Group Incorporated come in, because we try to provide that narrative and a space in order to learn that narrative. Because like even with the critical race theory thing, it's problematic to me because it's like all they do is focus on the negativity. Like they don't balance it out. Okay, yeah, talk about the tragedies, but also talk about the victories.
Yes.
Because even like you look at like Tulsa, Oklahoma, right?
Okay.
That narrative is so skewered. Like, you know, people like, okay, a lot of black folks got killed. It was Black Wall Street. The truth of the matter is we had a lot of Black Wall Streets throughout the country. A lot of prosperous black communities and towns existed in America at one point in time that was wiped out the map systematically. You look at Black Wall Street, for example.
Okay.
Like they burned down Greenwood, Tulsa, Oklahoma in 24 hours. But what they don't tell you is that black men who were armed stood up against the white mob and were actually winning. If you look at the testimonies of survivors who lived to be in their 90s and even 100s, they talked about witnessing the black men who were World War I veterans going toe-to-toe with the white mob and beating them, that they killed so many white people that they dumped their bodies to the Arkansas River to cover them up because the Arkansas River had quicksand. So there was so many white folks getting killed by the black men in self-defense that they was covering up the casualties count by throwing their bodies in the Arkansas River. And it wasn't until the black men turned their weapons and themselves in to the so-called authorities that when they burned down Black Wall Street. And also what they don't tell you is that the most prominent person to be killed at Black Wall Street race massacre was a guy named Andrew C. Jackson, one of the top black surgeons in the country. I dare say the world. The Mayo brothers who founded the Mayo Clinic say he was the greatest Negro surgeon in the country. And he invented tools that are still used to this day in medicine, in surgery. He invented these things.
What's his name?
Andrew C. Jackson.
Never heard of that.
Like he was like President Jackson, right? But he was born February in the 1870s here in Memphis, though. Memphis? He was a Memphian, right? He was a world-class surgeon who was from Memphis. He was born here back in February, I want to say February 1873. And he moved into Oklahoma as an adult. But he was a top surgeon, right? And he was living next door to a former police commissioner and judge. I think his name was John Oliphant, this white guy. And the white guy told the white mob, don't kill this man. This man is an asset, a credit to his race. And he saved the lives of both black and white people. And they killed him anyway. I think it was a teenage white kid at 14 years young that shot him fatally. And he started filling his body up with lead. They basically lynched him on the spot in front of his home. Even though he was giving himself up. But this is a dude from Memphis. Because people don't understand about the Black Wall Street connection in Tulsa to Memphis. You know, you had the People's Grocery lynching over there in South Memphis by Lemoyne. And one of Ida B. Wells' best friends, Thomas Moss, was one of the people that got lynched. He was a black leader in the community. Wells reprinted his last words. He said, tell my people to go west because they can't get any justice here. So Ida B. Wells said, y'all need to leave Memphis. And about 6,000 black folks left Memphis. And a lot of them ended up in Oklahoma and what became known as Black Wall Street. And what's interesting, one of the founders of Black Wall Street, of Greenwood, was a guy who was from Arkansas. And they had a store called the People's Grocery Store in Tulsa. So I think that's an interesting connection between these people's grocery stores that has not really been investigated and looked at thoroughly. It's like when Ida B. Wells and Mary Church Terrell started them Negro women clubs. Very powerful political organizational tools and organizations. And we don't really do a lot of due diligence in the power of organizing among your own and advocating for an agenda that puts your people and yourself first. And this is what these men and women did back in the day. But everything I find out when I do research as it relates to American history finds its way back to Memphis. or to this region of the country, which is fascinating.
That is so. I've never heard that story.
Yeah.
And never heard the story that Ida B. Wells' friend says, y'all go where? And they went to Oklahoma.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how they started. A lot of Memphians went to what became known as, we know as Black Wall Street. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then another thing they don't tell you about the Tulsa thing, they say, oh man, they never rebounded. You gotta understand, these people lost everything, their lives, their livelihoods, their homes. They didn't get one red cent from the insurance companies, but yet they rebuilt and came back stronger and more prosperous than ever. Even during the Great Depression, people were thriving in Tulsa and Black Wall Street. But what happened? Systematic racism, so-called Negro removal or urban renewal. But like James Baldwin said, Negro removal. And so they came with the urban renewal thing, the gentrification thing. They got so Black folks could roam around and go different places instead of being concentrated in their neighborhood. And also what they did, they built a highway through that community to stop them from building buildings a certain height. So they basically, it was systemic racism that destroyed Black Wall Street. It wasn't the white mob in 21. It was our own government that destroyed Black Wall Street. And then also, this is another phenomenon called drown towns. You ever heard of drown towns?
No.
It's a place outside of Atlanta called Lake Lanier. And they're known for a lot of casualties, fatalities of people drowning, having weird boat Lake Lanier. But Lake Lanier was a man-made lake that was created back in the 50s. It covered up a town called Oscarville. It was an all-black town.
Okay.
That was wiped out the map because of a lynch mob rule. Oscarville was a black thriving town in Georgia, in Forsyth County, down there in Georgia. And allegedly, white people believe 3 black men or several black men were guilty of raping and killing this white lady. They used this as an excuse to get rid of all the black folks in that town as well as in that county. So this back in 1912, I want to say September 1912. So they drove a lot of black folks out of the county. To this day, there's hardly any black people in Forsyth County. But that Lake Lanier covers Oscarville. But there's a lot of places in places like Georgia and Alabama throughout the country that this drown town phenomenon cover up black towns and other towns. It all comes to a racial or some type of racial mob violence incident. Then you got the phenomenon of sundown towns where you used to have black folks in these towns, but because of white mob rule ran them out. And so these places like in the Ozarks and stuff like that, they used to have a decent sized black community, but something traumatic happened maybe 100-something years ago that they used to justify getting all the black folks out of that town. There's a good documentary that came out on PBS in the 2000s. I think it's called Banishment or Banishing. And it's about this phenomenon of driving black folks out of these communities. They talk about the sundown towns, the drown towns, and things of that nature. And it was interesting because they interviewed a sister, a beautiful black woman who was almost 100 at the time of the interview, but she was a child when her father and her family had to leave Forsyth County in fear of their lives.
Wow.
So her father had 40 acres to his person, successful, prosperous, but he had to leave all that behind. So she didn't come back to Forsyth County decades later. And when they come back, she sees that the family cemetery is on the property of the people who own the land. White people own this land where a house is or home is the home of her family cemetery.
Wow.
Which was dilapidated, which was neglected for decades because none of the family felt safe to come back to take care of their deceased final resting place. And then they go to the courthouse, and the courthouse shows that her father owned the property, but then it showed a space where it's not owned by anybody. Then all of a sudden somebody brought the property and they own it. It's a phenomenon. I guess it's kind of like you squat on a property that's abandoned. Then after a period of time, like a certain period of squatting on it, you become the owner legally. So this is how they talked to the town lawyer. He said, well, they could have always came back and claimed the land. I said, yeah, but Hosea Williams, one of Dr. King's trusted lieutenants, tried to leave a peace march, a racial, because he tried to do a peace march back in the 80s through Forsyth County. They had to have the Georgia State Troopers and the FBI come out to protect them because he had skinheads and Klansmen throwing rocks and bottles at that person. So this is the 80s.
Yes.
But the white lawyer said, hey, they could have always came back and reclaimed. It was never, that's the 80s. It's not that long ago where they had to have this type of protection against a mob. So we've been through a lot of stuff that we don't want to talk about. It's traumatic. But also, like I said, we got to balance it out because we with the Black Wall Street thing, we got to tell the whole story.
Yeah.
Not just one part of it and just leave it at that.
I like it. If you just tuned in, I love this brother, Ron Hurd. You just know history. We are talking today about We All Be Group, and we're going to tell you what's coming up. I'm always excited about this. 535-9342 is our number. 1-800-5039-342 will get you in to us. You're listening to the legendary WDIA.
All over the town, working hard to bring you the best, never settling for less. See, every day is something different. One day it's relationships, next day might be politics. It's the Bev Jason Show.
Good morning and welcome back. We are talking with Mr. Ron Hurd, who is the CEA of the We All Be Group Incorporated. Ron, we're going to our phone lines. Some folks want to talk to you.
All right.
Thank you for waiting, y'all. Hi, Les. Hi, Les.
Hello, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. I'm just recalling history. I was just sitting here listening to your show. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Rome fell in 192 AD. That's right, Mr. Hurd?
Wrong?
Yes.
I'll go with you. We'll go with you on that one. Go ahead.
Okay. And they was back in power 1453.
Okay.
Time known as the Renaissance. He been in charge. He been the ruler ever since, and he still, white supremacy still rules over the entire world. We had an area, I know you heard of Militant.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Growing up, my grandmama and my mom used to tell me they used to call that the sundown town.
Mm.
You weren't allowed up there after sundown. Whitehaven, Germantown, Collierville, all these little areas. If you got caught there, you better be pushing a lawnmower or you better be going to clean somebody's house, because if you didn't, you was in trouble.
Well, you know, Mr. Les, let me say this, that when you mentioned Germantown, my dad was born in Germantown. There was a lot of black folks in Germantown. Mm-hmm. And
yeah, they left cotton and picking cotton.
But they had their land, but they moved to the city, and you know, then the folks took their land and stuff. But there was a lot of black folks, Germantown.
That's what I'm saying. A lot of opportunities and land and money and everything was taken.
Yes, sir. You have a specific question for Mr. Ron?
Oh, no, I just had a suggestion, and I just wanted to because we got a lot of information that's coming out. He said some things I didn't know, and I'm big in history, especially black history.
Okay.
And I hadn't a lot of those things. Now, I knew about Tulsa, Oklahoma, but it was a lot of towns that was done that way.
Right.
Yes, sir.
And you got to know your history, because if you don't, you're going to repeat it.
Yes, sir.
Y'all have a good day now.
Thank you, Mr. Les. Yeah. Bye-bye. Brother Omar.
Hello, Bill?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me, Bill?
I hear you loud and clear, Brother Omar.
I appreciate people like the young man there and Dr. Warren Harper. I'm pretty sure he's familiar with Dr. Warren Harper.
Oh, yes, sir. I met him before. We was on a panel discussion about.
I have been reading a book about the hell fighters of Harlem, those young men that were drafted in World War I to fight in Europe, and they had to fight under the flag of the European, the French.
Right.
And they were treated worse than the German prisoners was. And they were heroic. They got awards. So many of them stayed over in France because racism was over here.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about the bravery that they had done. They tried to assert themselves by fighting for this country. And so many of us was lynched while they were in uniform, young man. And that's all I got to say. I want to add something to that. Every time there was a riot somewhere, white police always sided with joined in and sided with the white rioters. So thank you for taking my little information, brother.
All right. Thank you, brother.
I want to add, I'm glad he brought that up. It's a couple of things. My first book was written about James Reese Europe, who was one of the leaders of the Harlem Hellfighters. He is credited being the first black man to lead troops in the battle during World War I. And he brought jazz to Europe, and his last name was Europe. And unfortunately, he was killed by one of his drummers stateside when he came back home from the war. He survived gas attacks and everything, only to be killed during a concert that they was having at Mechanics Hall in Boston, May the 9th, 1919. He was stabbed by his drummer, this guy from South Carolina, from Charleston, named Herbert Wright. He just jumped up and stabbed him with a penknife in his neck, and he bled out. He bled to death. But he was the first black man or first black person given a public funeral in New York City history. And also, he was the childhood hero of George Gershwin, the guy who did, Summertime.
I know George Gershwin.
When he was a kid, he used to listen to James Reese Europe play piano at this club called Barry Wilkins in Harlem.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very well familiar with the Harlem Hellfighters. Yeah, Sergeant Henry, who just got his Medal of Honor during the Obama administration. And he was denied all types of benefits because they did a movie, I think back in the 40s, about Sergeant Alvin York from Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
See, if Alvin York was Mickey Mantle, then Henry Johnson was Willie Mays. Because he took on all these Germans by himself with just a knife. He was wounded. He killed about maybe 20, 24 Germans by himself to protect him and his fellow soldier. But he was mistreated horribly when he came back home. And also, it was a thing called the Houston Race Massacre or Houston Race War. Because he is correct that most of your race massacres and incidents is started by police. Mm-hmm. They are, police misconduct, whether it be East St. Louis in 1917, whether it be, take your pick, even Black Wall Street, police misconduct. A lot of things, all these race riots, Memphis Race Massacre, started because of police misconduct and bad behavior. But you had the 24th Infantry Regiment stationed in Houston, working. Now they was like helping to work on an installation, a fort installation down in Houston back in 1917. Had the Houston Race Massacre, where these brothers would defend themselves, like they were called. We call that. It said that they mutiny, and now the army is doing the military is doing reverse. They say, you know what? They didn't really mutiny. They was actually defending themselves against a white mob and police brutality. Because what happened that the soldiers found out that one of their fellow soldiers got beat up real bad by the Houston police. Because the fellow soldier was coming in defense of this black woman named Sarah Travers, and she'll get by the police, and one of the soldiers asked him. And then they thought that one of their leaders, this guy named Charlie Baltimore, was killed by the police. He wasn't. He was just roughed up a little bit. But they took their guns and marched on Houston and got the police. They killed several police officers, and the Houston police had a really notorious reputation for brutalizing the black citizens of Houston. Because we look at Houston now, it's a big town, but back then it was kind of like a big cow town.
Yeah.
It was 1917. It was still growing before it became this town that it is now. But you had like the largest murder trial in U.S. history. They basically hanged all these black men and denied them due process. And they didn't even get the permission from the president, Woodrow Wilson, when they hanged, I believe, the first 13 black men. Now, this was dramatized. If you look at the Roots, the next generation, they showed the act. They recreated the scene of these men of the 24th being hanged from the gallows in Texas.
Wow!
And these brothers were so brave. They knew that they were facing death, that they were not going to be treated right by the Just Us system. But they marched to their death singing gospel tunes, and even the white soldiers that guarded them had tears. I mean, this is like from the actual accounts. They had so much respect for these men to fight like men and to die like men. But even Woodrow Wilson, who was a white supremacist, who showed the movie Birth of a Nation in the White House, he said it was like writing history with lightning. Because his friend, his college classmate, Thomas Dixon, wrote the book called The Klansman, which was the foundation for that movie. And Thomas Dixon was a very famous evangelist up in New York. He's from the South, but he was in New York. Matter of fact, I believe Teddy Roosevelt went to his church every now and then. This was the president at one point in the United States. And so now these guys were buried in a military cemetery outside of San Antonio. I think Fort Sam Houston National Cemetery. And now the military, they doing the reverse. They say, you know what? These guys didn't really mutiny. They were defending themselves, and they took an oath to protect the United States against enemies, both foreign and domestic. Because even now they try to say, maybe we could pardon them now. This is what they're trying to do now, because now they got a narrative installation in the cemetery where these guys are buried, telling their side of the story now, saying, you know what, they wasn't really wrong for how they responded because the police was out of line, how they treated them soldiers. Just like in Memphis back in 1866, the Irish police officers were out of line how they treated them U.S. colored troops that were stationed nearby Memphis. So all these race massacres and acts of mob violence held the permission of the police. Even the people grocery lynching, police and the judge was involved in lynching these 3 black men. And most of your lynching victims were black business owners or folks in politics. This was about economics. This ain't about rape. This was about economics.
Economics, yeah.
Like Funkonomics or whatever you want to call it. Yeah,
I like it. Ronald Hurd is my guest. Going to take a little break. Going to come back. Hold on, callers. We're going to get you in here, and we're going to talk about what's coming up this week with Ron. 535-9342 is our number. 1-800-503-9342 are the numbers to WDIA.
Great information, good conversation, and most certainly entertaining on the Bev Johnson Show, only on WDIA.
Telling you to just keep the faith. No matter where I go, I'm picking up Bev Johnson Show because Bev got Memphis talking. It's the Bev Johnson Show.
And we're talking with Ron Hurd. Back to our phone lines to talk with you. Prince of the Charles.
Say my name. How you doing, my love?
Doing well today, brother. You?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. Good afternoon to your callers and your listeners and to your host. How you doing, Mr. Hurd?
I'm doing great, man. I'm still here. I'm good.
Yeah. Being in Memphis, that's a good thing. You know what? I was up here, jotting down some things that you were saying. And Beth, about 2 as you know, I love watching, movies and the history movies. Well, 2 years ago, a movie came out called 24, the 24th. I should take that back.
Yeah, 24.
And it dealt with what took place, what the young man on your panel was talking about. And it was a very touching and moving documentary dealing with what these young men had to endure in Houston. And Bev, I'm going to be honest with you. And I can't speak for you, Mr. Hurd, but there's no damn way that I would have sit up here and took that kind of abuse. My blue-eyed soul brothers. I'm just going to be honest.
Right.
I know it's easy for me to say it at this time because I wasn't living in that time and it was back then. But you know what? There's no way in the world that I could have sit there and let someone massacre me in that fashion or done the things to me that what happened to them. These were men.
What would you have done,
and
Prince? What could you do?
I would have. Well, they had firearms, and you know how I am. I'm an advocate deer hunter. But I would have stopped picking them off like flies.
Okay.
I would have been somewhere in the trees, bush, somewhere where I would camouflage. Let me take that back, and I would start picking them off, one by one. That's just been me. I just wasn't going to go down like them singing, gospel hymns, dealing with that. That was the time. But Mr. Ham,
Mr.
I hope I
Hurd.
pronounced your name right.
Yeah,
Mr. Hurd. I'm sorry.
Hurd.
It's fine.
Mr. Hurd. Okay. The question I will call in. I'm a big history buff. So is it anywhere that I can find the books that you have written so I can go back and read more about it? Because Dr. Harper brings a lot of this knowledge to our attention, and I'm always about it. And another brother that calls Brother Norman Redwing, He brings a lot of history. And another one, Black Hebrew. I love how Black Hebrew brings a lot of things. But if you can, I would love to purchase a couple of your a book or two that you have so I can read more about it. Because as growing up as a child in city school, we were never taught this. We were taught white history through the yin yang, right. But Black history, we never got the true essence unless it was February, and that was Black History Month. But the school,
unless you had a teacher who knew that history, like Nat D. Williams. But anyway,
I'll think about it.
But Ron, tell Prince where, if you have books or some books so you can go to.
Well, I have a book out on James Reese Europe. It needs to be updated because I wrote it in 2005, and since that time, a lot of developments have happened.
I'm sorry.
I got a book about James Reese Europe called James Reese Europe Jazz Lieutenant, and it's on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon, but it's like I need to update it because so many other things have happened since that time in a good way, positive way, because more people are becoming aware of his name and his legacy and contribution. Like he actually had like a great great grandson that was on American Idol several years ago.
Okay.
So so they got talent in that family, but with those guys, I don't look at them as being like I thought they were brave for like doing what they did. And then turn themselves in to face what they face. Because I think that took a lot of courage to do that.
Sure it does.
Because also, like, when I talk about critical race theory, like, when people talk about the Emmett Till situation, because I did a lot of research and interviews with people connected to the Emmett Till thing. What happened in Mississippi the year before was this guy named Eddie Knoll. He was a World War II veteran, a sharpshooter. He was a trick shot. This dude used to shoot, like, bobby pins out of his wife's head, like he having her hair. She had like a match or cigarette in her mouth. He shoot it out of her mouth. It was like it was a quick shot, trick shot. And back on January 9th of 54, I believe that was the second weekend of 1954, he confronted this white man that she worked for at this juke joint. Allegedly he was sleeping with his wife, and everybody, the whole town laughing at him. Both black and white knew that this guy was messing around with his wife. So he tried to take his wife home. Now this dude, Eddie Knoll, was a short, small, high yellow dude, like a mulatto looking guy. And this white dude was a big guy, was a bully, so he started pushing him around, disrespecting him. So Eddie went back outside and got his shotgun and shot the dude. Not only did he shoot that guy, he shot the sheriff deputy. Then he shot another white man that was part of this white mob looking for him. So they had one of the largest manhunts in Mississippi history with like 1,000 white men at one time looking for this dude for several weeks and during an ice storm. You talk about, they were looking. He got pictures in a commercial appeal of them trying to find this guy. And this guy was a sharpshooter. Like he would be hiding in the woods, shooting at the white mob. He wasn't trying to kill a lot of them. He was trying to save his life. He was trying to preserve his life. Because there were many times where he could have killed a whole bunch of white folks, but he killed just 3. And what he ended up doing, he turned himself into a white friend of the family. So they took him to Jackson, Mississippi. They put him in the Whitfield Insane Asylum. So they started doing like a electroshock therapy on him, everything. And they're about to do a lobotomy. They were trying to scramble his brain. And then something happened. This dude never faced trial. He never was stood trial for, no capital punishment.
Okay.
What happened was the white part of his family intervened. Because Eddie Knoll was named after a very influential Mississippi governor named Edmund Knoll. So that was one of his people. So the white part of his family intervened, and they kept him in Whitfield, I believe, for about 20 years. He got released to his family, moved to Indiana, and died peacefully 24 years later in 1994. And he survived. See, they don't tell you. They don't tell you that
history. Oh my God, that before Emmett Till.
Right,
I never heard that story.
It was a white lawyer that wrote the book called The Time of Eddie Knoll. I believe it's out of print, but I interviewed him on my YouTube channel.
Okay.
We All BTV. And also, I want to tell you about one thing. Like 1950, it was this thing called the Attala County Massacre that happened in Mississippi. Attala County is where Oprah Winfrey was born. And what happened was this white man and two white brothers broke into this home, this black man's home, and almost massacred his whole family. Because that white man wanted to rape his wife and daughter, but he came back. I think the sheriff arrested him. So he broke out of prison and he tried to get his revenge. So he almost killed the whole family. Now the father lived long enough to testify in court. Like we all talking about Emmett Till's great uncle Most Wright.
Yes.
That Ernest Withers photo there they be. This dude was on a gurney. He was basically almost about to be dead. They strolled him into court, and he pointed out the guys who did this to him. He ended up dying. But here's the thing: all white male jury, found all 3 white men guilty. Gave 2 of them life sentences, and one got like 10 or 12 years in prison. So the guy who was the lead in the whole thing, he ended up dying in prison almost 20 years later.
Wow.
So they don't talk about, but there's a white guy that wrote a book about this. His father was an award-winning photographer who took pictures, took some very famous pictures at the time of that whole incident where they caught the guys who did this to this black family. But this happened 5 years before the Till thing. 4 or 5 years before Till.
That's history. Thank you, Prince. Yes,
Do me
sir.
a favor. I'm driving. Could you write down that book he was talking about? And if I can find it on YouTube, I would love to go and view it.
All right. Thank you, Prince. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Yeah. Oh, Ron always has history. Let's get to what's coming up this weekend,
All right.
Ron. Jimmy Lunsford 2022 Legacy Awards. And for people who don't know Jimmy Lunsford, who was Jimmy Lunsford?
Well, Jimmy Lunsford was the first, considered the first high school band director in the city schools, at least for black children back in the 20s. He was not hired to be a band leader. He was hired to be like a gym teacher and stuff like that, anything but music. But his passion was music. He was born in Fulton, Mississippi, or the Evergreen community outside of Fulton, back on June 6, 1902. He came from a very prosperous land-owning family. Like his parents owned almost 80 acres of land. I think his grandparents owned like 300 acres. And to this day, his people still own land down in Evergreen outside of Fulton. I did a tour with one of his people his mom was the first cousin of Jimmy Lunsford. And he took me around the community. They had their homes and had their land, and by the lake they had having good times down there. But anyway, he was raised in Denver, Colorado, and his music teacher there was Wilberforce Whiteman, who was the music superintendent of the Denver public schools. He thought that black and white should have a high quality music education. So, what's crazy is that Wilberforce Whiteman was also the father of Paul Whiteman, a very commercially successful jazz band leader back in the day, back in the 20s, 30s, and so forth. He was known as the king of jazz, I guess because his name was Whiteman. He got to be the ruler, right? But that was Jimmy Lunsford's teacher, Wilberforce Whiteman, and he went back down south to get his education at Fisk University, class of 26. Then he went up to New York to get some more certification. Then he found his way in Memphis towards the end of the 1920s. And he is credited with being the first person in the history of the world to teach what is now known as jazz studies in a formal educational setting. And he formed a very popular dance band locally with some of his best students called the Chickasaw Syncopators. So in 1930, he quit his day job and left with his best high school students and buddies from Fisk University to go for stardom and riches and fame and fortune or whatever. And 4 years later, the Jimmy Lunsford Orchestra, as they were known, became the house band at the Carter Club up in New York after Duke Ellington and Cab Calloway. And they were so popular among black dancers throughout the country that they were nicknamed the Harlem Express. Like these folks, Jimmy Lunsford band was bigger than Duke Ellington and Count Basie. Name any band of their era. He had the biggest name band. Glenn Miller, who was a great band leader.
Yeah.
If Jimmy Lunsford was Magic Johnson, then Glenn Miller was Larry Bird.
Okay.
But Glenn Miller said it himself. He said, Jimmy Lunsford has the best of all bands. Duke is great as an Ellington. Count is remarkable as in Basie. But Lunsford tops them both. And what was the key to Lunsford is like his amazing sound. They called it Lunsford 2-beat. Had a very distinctive sound that was really the envy of other band leaders. But also he had an amazing, immaculate presentation. Like he really put the show in Showtime. And his band had tailor-made suits. They could sing, dance, and tell jokes. The trumpet section would throw their trumpets in the air and catch them in unison and play where they left off at. Wow. A lot of precision and discipline. They was also nicknamed the Trained Seals for their amazing athleticism and discipline and precision. So, but also Jimmy was an aviation pioneer. Like he learned how to fly back in 1939. He brought his first airplane in 1940. In today's money would be almost $500,000. So this guy was interested because I don't think Duke Ellington and Count Basie knew how to fly. But he would fly the gigs and everything in his airplane. Sometimes he even crashed his plane at one point and walked away from it. That's amazing to me. But what I love about Mr. Lunsford is that he was a great philanthropist and humanitarian. When he would come back to Memphis and sell out on Beale Street or whatnot, he would give free concerts and musician clinics for the kids at Manassas. Their band back then was known as the Manassas Rhythm Bombers. I had the pleasure of becoming friends with the late, great Emerson Abel Jr. Arguably one of our greatest band directors and music educators this city has ever produced.
Yeah.
He was a huge fan of Jimmy Lunsford. But it was a guy in Jimmy Lunsford's band named Joe Thomas, this tenor saxophonist from Kansas City, that really caught his imagination because Mr. Abel ended up taking up saxophone, had a beautiful tone on tenor saxophone. So this really sparked something in Mr. Abel to pursue what he ended up pursuing as far as a musician and a music educator. And I always tell people that Mr. Abel was a co-founder of the Southern Heritage Classic with Fred Jones. They actually developed the concept for the Southern Heritage Classic in his living room. Mr. Abel had the connections to the HBCUs, and he was a college band director at one point, so he had all the connections to the HBCUs. He did the first logo for the Southern Heritage Classic because he was an amazing visual artist. He was a true Renaissance man. Had amazing handwriting, a calligrapher. Always got a calligrapher, and beautiful handwriting. Just an extraordinary, beautiful guy, brilliant but frustrated because he was trying to bring honor to the name of Lunsford in his own town, and people wasn't buying it. It's like doing this Jimmy Lunsford thing is like he's backed by unpopular demand. Like there's no demand to know about this amazing man who thought enough of Memphis to be buried here.
Yeah.
So like this is what we're doing. Also, how he died was unique because I say he was bigger than Duke and Count Basie while he was alive. And he was the #1 band of choice for black people. Black dancers preferred him over everybody. But he died a weird way. Like he was up in Oregon, Seaside, Oregon, July 12, 1947. He was signing autographs and whatnot in his music shop and he dropped dead. Now they said it was a heart attack, but other people say he was food poisoned because allegedly, legend has it that he got into an argument at a restaurant in that town with the management about not serving black people. Because what people got to realize about Oregon, when it became a state in 1859, 2 years before the Civil War, Oregon had in its constitution that black folks could not own, live, or work, or own property, live, or work in Oregon. So black folks didn't really start coming to Oregon until around World War II because of the wartime industry. So Jimmy's like, hey, this is above the Mason-Dixon line. You can't treat us like this, but Malcolm said anything south of Canada is Mississippi. So, I mean, you got two different philosophies on that. So Jimmy, they said, we will serve y'all. And Jimmy said they wanted hamburgers, but they didn't have no hamburgers for them. At least they had beef sandwiches. So whoever ate the beef sandwiches got sick from my understanding because the band did not know he was dead until halfway through their concert at this place called the Bungalow, which is now a mall. They got a little horse carousel in the middle of the mall. I actually went there around the 70th anniversary of his passing because I'm working on a documentary about Mr. Lunsford.
Okay.
And I went there. They did a little story about me in the local newspaper and stuff. It was interesting, but most of the band, they didn't know he was dead until halfway through the concert. So that changed the whole feeling of everything. They got through it. Actually, I interviewed a woman who was a town historian, but she was a big fan of Mr. Lunsford, this white lady, to get her take about how she felt about what happened that night, because she was there the night when the band played their last gig, their first gig after Lunsford passed. So he's buried in Elmwood Cemetery. He had a large funeral up in New York.
Okay.
The lead of Black Hollywood came out, Sammy Davis Jr., I think, Pearl Bailey, people like that. Pearl Bailey, excuse me. Then he had a funeral here in Memphis, July 21st, 1947. And what people don't know is that his best friend was David Whalum, the patriarch of the Whalum family. That's Kirk Whalum's grandfather. He was Jimmy Lunsford's best friend. He was a singer. He had a singing group. And, amazing musical family. Like you look at the Marcellus family in New Orleans, they are music royalty here. So he sung at Jimmy Lunsford's funeral and died in a car accident on the way home. So he's actually buried just several hundred feet from Jimmy Lunsford in Elmwood.
Wow.
I didn't know that until like several months ago, actually.
Wow.
Which is amazing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, this weekend again, and you're having the Jimmy Lunsford 2022 Legacy Awards, a celebration of Memphis music and heritage, and I was so proud to be a part of that last year. Thank you so much.
I was honored the Queen of Talk as our homecoming court queen this year. It was a no-brainer.
Yeah.
You very well deserving and so much more.
Thank you. So tell us about who are you all honoring this year?
Well, we're having the Jimmy Lunsford Legacy Awards this year at the Orpheum, which is a different experience. Actually, you know, they next door to each other.
Yeah, the Halloran.
Yeah, the Halloran last year, yeah, but then this year at the Orpheum. And it's going to be Saturday, October 22nd from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. And it's free to the public. You can register for it on Eventbrite, or maybe you can show up the day of. We might have some seats available, or may have some seats. But this year, our homecoming court includes the posthumous king, Dr. William Herbert Brewster, the Right Reverend Dr. William Herbert Brewster, who was Elvis Presley's favorite minister. Elvis, back in the day, used to go to East Trigg Avenue off of Bellevue to listen to Dr. Brewster and his choir do their thing. And, you know, you had the great Queen Anderson in that choir, who some people believe was better than Mahalia Jackson. And you can listen to her online, and she had a phenomenal voice, a true ensemble. And Dr. Brewster wrote the song "Move On Up a Little Higher," which was one of the first million sellers in gospel music history, and really was a signature song for the one and only Mahalia Jackson. And he also did the first religious musical play. Like you think about the stuff that Tyler Perry and them doing now, or Mama I Burned the Beans or something like that. He did the first musical religious play that went on tour throughout the country. So he has a phenomenal legacy. And we honoring the queen is Lucy Campbell. The posthumous queen is Lucy E. Campbell, longtime educator at Booker T. Washington High School. Believe she taught history and English, if I'm not mistaken. And she was the longtime music director of the National Baptist Convention. And she also helped mentor the likes of Marian Anderson, a black opera star who was refused the right to sing at Constitutional Hall, but ended up singing on the steps of Lincoln Memorial. But she was the one that debuted her nationally. And also she helped train and mentor Mahalia Jackson. And then she also discovered and trained Dr. King's favorite singer, who is not Mahalia Jackson, but a guy from South Memphis named J. Robert Bradley, who passed in 2007 in Nashville. He was known as Mr. Baptist. Man, had a huge range, an operatic voice. Dr. King's favorite singer. And Mahalia Jackson said once he sung Amazing Grace, nobody could do it better. That's how I praise. So that's J. Robert Bradley from South Memphis. So we're honoring her as the posthumous queen. And then we got our prince is Christopher Golson, a.k.a. Drummer Boy, the hip-hop producer. You know, his father, James Golson, was the first black music professor at the University of Memphis, longtime clarinetist in the Memphis Symphony Orchestra. So he's very proud of his son. But, you know, Drummer Boy put a lot of people on. He did this song he produced a song, Put On For My City, that Kanye West and Young Jeezy wrote on, and is nominated for a couple of awards. So he definitely put on for the city. He's a great ambassador for Memphis. And so also the princess is the one and only, you talking about some gospel talent, generational talent, really ensemble, but could sing. Deborah Manning Thomas.
Oh, yeah.
That's our princess.
Okay.
You know, she's well-deserving so much more. And then our queen is the one and only Wendy Moulton.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing voice, who should have won the voice last year.
Sure should have.
I think she got robbed. I think it was rigged.
Yeah.
It was rigged. You know, but we honor her as our queen this year, rightfully so. And also
your king this year?
Lawrence Boo Mitchell.
Yeah,
Royal
Boo Mitchell.
Studios.
Yes.
That's the legacy that he represents. He does his grandfather, Willie Mitchell, well.
Yes, he does.
His accolades he have done on his own, but also this is the 60th anniversary of Royal Studios. And also we're doing some special honors to my pastor, my childhood pastor, and the person who baptized me, Elder 1D Ship. I didn't know that he was a pioneer in gospel music until a couple of years ago that NPR did a spotlight on him. And then he got this, I didn't know he had a record label, because all I knew growing up, when we would go to his Christmas parties, they had a great sound system. I had no idea that he was into manufacturing sound and producing sound for gospel greats, you know, back in the day. So I said, we got to honor him and do it big for him. So we're going to have Elizabeth King, one of his artists, bless him that night with a performance. Then we're doing tribute to Young Dolph, the rapper. We're going to have like Juke going on. Some of his family will be in attendance for that as well. And also we're honoring Hugh David Whalum, the best friend of Jimmy Lunsford. And Hugh David Whalum, great-grandson, Cortland Whalum, great singer,
Yes.
will be performing a tribute to his great grandfather.
Sounds good.
Among other things.
Yeah, it is always a good program. This is happening Saturday, October 22nd
Yes, ma'am.
at the Orpheum.
Yes.
Starting at 5 o'clock.
Yes, ma'am. Doors open at 4 o'clock, but it
4
starts
o'clock.
at 5.
5 o'clock is a free event. You
free
can go on where can they register?
At Eventbrite. You can find us on Eventbrite.
The Jimmy Lunsford 2022 Legacy Awards. Yeah, that sounds it. I had a fabulous time last year. It was great, and the music was awesome.
I appreciate it.
I loved it. I loved it, brother. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. Always, Ron Hurd, it's always a pleasure to have you. I'm going to get you back. You're going to stay 2 hours next time.
I appreciate it. Also, if people people can't come in person,
Yeah.
it's free for y'all, but we're paying a cost for it.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
you have some unexpected costs or whatever.
Not, people say it's free, but somebody's paying
Somebody
for it.
paid the bill. I'm footing
Yeah.
the bill. But if you like to donate, mind, you could just cash out us at $R2C2H2, or you could text me or call me at 901-299-4355 to find out how you could donate. We always looking for things to help, and we can come out even bigger and better next year.
That's right. I love it. When you come up bigger, you're at the Orpheum. That's a little bigger. Move from the Halloran to the Orpheum. Ron Hurd, thank you so much for being here. I love your history. You're going to come back.
Yes,
I know.
ma'am.
We're going to
It's
do
an
2
honor to
hours.
be
Come
here.
back.
Yes,
Right. When we come back, thank you, Ron, again. Tell your mom I said hi.
Yes, ma'am.
When we come back, more information with me, Bev Johnson, on The Bev Johnson Show, only on WDIA.
Whether you're in Arkansas, Tennessee, or Mississippi, on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, thank you for listening to The Bev Johnson Show on WDIA Memphis.
Although the 2022 Jimmy Lunsford Legacy Awards was free for the people, all power to the people, we at the We All Be Group Incorporated still incurred a debt. So we want y'all to help us, like we help you all. Help us retire that debt. Help us retire the debt so we can keep on doing this God work that we were sent to do, because we all be in it to win it. You can cash out your support, $R2C2H2. You could Google Pay, PayPal, and Zelle your support at R2C2H2@gmail.com. That's our email, R2C2H2@gmail.com. You can even Venmo your support at R2C2H2. That's at R2C2H2. And now you can Apple Pay your report. You could type in my phone number, 901-299-4355. That's 901-299-4355. Because it takes a village to raise a jazzocracy. Because Jimmy Lunsford matters, Black history matters, and Black music most definitely matters. See how it works? Somewhere. And let me further add that the We All Be Group Incorporated is an recognized 501c3 nonprofit organization by you-know-who, the IRS. So your donation is tax deductible. Is tax deductible. Is tax deductible. Because celebrating Lunsford is our business, and we need your help.